From the Oklahoma newsroom, it's time for the Red Zone, our weekly extended look at Oklahoma football. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with fellow columnist Barry Trammell, OU beat writer Ryan Aber. Guys, kind of a big game this week. It is Thanksgiving week, but that's a short week for Oklahoma as they head to West Virginia on Friday. It's a Black Friday game, guys, and it's a big one. Big 12 title implications, national implications with the college football playoff. Ryan, lay it all out for us. I mean, what's at stake here for the Sooners?
Well, Oklahoma doesn't have a clear path to the college football playoff, but in order to get there, they've got to win this game and win the Big 12 title game. If OU wins this game, they'll be the number one seed in the Big 12 championship game next week, likely against Texas, as long as Texas takes care of Kansas. And then you've got to hope that something happens along the lines of Ohio State beating Michigan and Ohio State not jumping the Sooners, or Notre Dame falling to USC. Not that either of those things seem very likely at this point, or Clemson losing a game, I guess, but don't think that's necessarily going to happen. And you want Alabama to win the SEC, because if they lose, they're still probably going to get in over Oklahoma, and another SEC team jumps up there into the fray. Yeah,
lots yet to be determined, Barry, and we have yet to see this week's college football rankings, but it doesn't seem like, the Sooners have yet to get the help that they need. They continue to win, but with the defense struggling, they're definitely going to need some help somewhere along the line, it looks like.
I think the help they could get is if these teams keep winning and keep the Sooners out of the playoff, where disaster awaits if you can't tackle any better than what we've seen. It's an odd year in that we're alternately talking about, can the Sooners squeeze into the playoff, and can the Sooners literally tackle the other team? The defense has had such historic problems that the playoff has almost become a side issue. Everybody would like to take a shot at Alabama. Kyler Murray against the Crimson Tide would be great theater, but this OU defense is such that every game is trepidation, starting with West Virginia, because those guys can play too. So it's just an odd season, I think, in Oklahoma football.
Yeah, it's an offensive defense right now, guys. Let's be honest. We were sitting here a week ago talking about the defense heading into the Kansas game, and I think we all thought, you know what? Holding Kansas in the single digits is possible, and all the ramifications of that. Now here we sit a week later, and Kansas scores 40 against the Sooners. And Barry, Kansas wasn't doing what Oklahoma State did, or Texas Tech did, or West Virginia is likely to want to do. They just battering rammed the Oklahoma defense, and that to me was a whole new sign of trouble, that something not flashy at all was giving them trouble.
Yeah, for a long time, the throwing and the catching has caused OU quite a bit of angst, but Kansas just ran like crazy on the Sooners, and that's a new scab that has formed. So, who knows what's going to happen with this Oklahoma defense. It's basically just played poorly all year. It hasn't really helped. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's gotten worse since Mike Stoops was fired. So, Lincoln Riley's just trying to pull this defense along and get to the end of the year and hope they've kept winning because of offense. And they're capable. But nobody's thinking 31-24 in Morgantown. They're thinking somewhere north of 50 is going to be required to win this game.
Ryan, when you've seen all of these games this year in person, as you think about this defense, as I said, it's not an over-the-top passing the ball, receivers running wide open that plagued the Sooners against Kansas. It was just, not getting guys down, not being able to stop a running back who is good but had a career day. Can you diagnose? I know it's been different types of offenses that have moved on the Sooners, but is there anything, as you think about the problems, that you can diagnose and say, if this could improve, or if this area could step up to another level, maybe some things would change with this defense?
Well, I think it's hard because it's a little bit of everything, like you mentioned. The couple games before, the Bedlam game, the Texas Tech game, they couldn't cover worth a lick. And then all of a sudden, but I thought they tackled better than they did, pre-Mike Stoops firing. But then this game Saturday night, they covered decently, although Kansas isn't going to really test you deep. but they allow Puka Williams to just run crazy on him. Weren't able to bring him down. Missed just a crazy amount of tackles. I mean, the play where Curtis Bolton has him in his grasp, sort of flings him toward the sideline, and he breaks out of 4 or 5 OU defenders, goes the other way for what was it, like an 8 or 10 yard gain, something like that. It was just sort of breathtaking in a negative way. So it's a little bit of everything. They've got to fix a lot on this side of the ball. It's just when they pull their finger out of the dam to seal off another hole, then that one just breaks open. It just seems like they don't have enough to patch that thing up right now.
Guys, as I think about the defensive problems, it's across the board. It's players, it's coaches, it's scheme, it's attitude. I mean, whatever you want to say, it is that problem. And yet when I think about these players, Barry, these guys, when Oklahoma recruited them, they were recruiting against other top-notch programs for a lot of these guys. They beat out other powerhouse programs to get these guys. So there has to be talent on the defense. Is there a unit you feel like could potentially, I mean, I'm not saying this week, I'm not even saying this season, but maybe the talent is there and it just hasn't been realized for whatever reason?
No, I don't think so. I think it's, you referred to it, I think it's cultural. I don't know what's going on, but whatever it is, there has not been a successful culture defensively sort of grown in Norman in the last 3 years. And whatever that root problem is, it permeates throughout the linebackers, the DBs, the line. I go back and forth on where they're the weakest. You can pick your game and decide what that is. It's just it really does need to just be torn down and start over with coaching changes, which is coming, but also with philosophy, with practice habits, with personnel, with everything. It's just, we see this from time to time offensively. Teams do it on offense. Bob Stoops did this to some degree back after the 2014 season. We said we've gotten too far away from what we used to do. That's why he went out and got Lincoln Riley and said, let's get back to the air raid principles that got us where we were. And we've seen the transformation very quickly and continuing to mushroom. So that needs to happen with the defense.
Is that, Ryan, to me, that's a reminder that it can get better. Maybe not this week or this season, but the idea that, the program of the Selmans, the program of Bosworth, the program of Casillas, Roy Williams, Rocky Calmus, whatever guys you want to throw out there, like it can get back to something better because this offense was wandering in the wilderness not too long ago, and now it's Baker Mayfield, it's Heisman, it's Kyler Murray. It can turn around.
Yeah, it can, although a big part of that is the fact that they got Baker Mayfield and they got Kyler Murray, and both those guys have sort of been lightning in a bottle, and that helps raise the level of everything around them. It helps raise the level of recruiting around them. On defense, it's harder to build that. It has to be a little bit more deliberate, I think, on that side of the ball, but I don't think there's any doubt that they need that complete cultural overhaul. I mean, you just look at the secondary from this team. Like Barry said, you can pick on a lot of areas. There have been problems all around, but the secondary specifically, they've had a lot of young players who have played pretty well as freshmen who have not progressed. I mean, Trey Norwood this year has struggled on some level. Jordan Parker a couple of years ago. Jordan Thomas played really well as a freshman. Zach Sanchez never really progressed, I think, the way a lot of people thought he would. And then Trey Brown the other day really struggled against Kansas. So you're seeing those problems and just a lack of development, I think. There's no doubt that they have good athletes. Like you said, these were guys who were recruited by, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, the Ohio States of the world. It's just a matter of developing them and turning them into a cohesive unit. Right now, not many of them are playing well individually, certainly not as a team.
Okay, so gloom and doom for a 10-1 team that could potentially play for the Big 12 title and might sneak into the college football playoffs. So with that in mind, the reason that all of those things are still possible hinges largely on number one. Kyler Murray has, again, doing amazing things. And this game, Ryan, sets up as two of the best quarterbacks in the country likely two guys that are going to be Heisman finalists. One for sure, I would say Kyler Murray is a for sure. Will Grier, the West Virginia quarterback, may also be there. I mean, this is going to be a fun matchup to watch on Friday night.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And because of all of the defensive problems that we've seen on OU's side, well, the defensive problems that we've seen on West Virginia's side, really, especially in the second half of that Oklahoma State game, I cannot see this game not being a shootout. Mm-hmm. These are two of the best quarterbacks around. They've both been fantastic, obviously a little bit different skill sets, but both these guys, I believe, are going to be in New York. I think there's pretty much the three finalists I can tell you right now are going to be Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama and these two quarterbacks. So this is almost an elimination game of sorts between those guys, and who is going to be able to challenge Tua. We'll see. I think Kyler's been narrowing the margins over the last few weeks for a lot of reasons. He's been fantastic. Tua's been really good too, but I think maybe there's been some Tua fatigue among the people who decide these things. So you could see that continue to narrow, and certainly if Kyler has a good game, that gets him a lot closer to that.
Barry, do you see a scenario or in your mind's eye, could Kyler Murray do something this week and potentially in the Big 12 title game to vault him to a Heisman? To have Baker Mayfield win it a year ago and Kyler Murray win it this year, I mean, that sort of thing has never happened before. So what would, in your mind's eye, would have to happen for Murray to overtake Tua, who you can expect to have good games as well?
Well, he's going to need a couple of monster games. But if Kyler Murray goes out and the Sooners put up 63 and needs most of those points to win, voters have to come around to this notion that Bobby Hebert's written about, which is, hey, this guy's valuable. Mm-hmm. He's not playing well in a 29-0 route. He's not playing well in a 41-7 route. He's playing well in a 63-56 game where if he doesn't score every time he has the ball, the roof caves in. And if he does that this week, if he does it next week against Texas in the Big 12 title game, then I think he gives a lot of voters reason to pause and say, hey, this guy's doing it with all the pressure in the world on him.
Yeah. You know, guys, we actually had this conversation at lunch a bit ago about, these vastly different units and how you've got the extreme high of the Oklahoma offense and the extreme low of the Oklahoma defense. I don't sense that Barry, what you're talking about with the must score, must excel, continue to do what they do offensively, I don't sense there being great frustration amongst the offense. There's obviously frustration on the defense. They want to be playing better. But Ryan, am I wrong? Do you sense sort of an internal battering of heads or sides as this thing has gone on?
Well, I'm sure there's some frustration on there, but you don't see it publicly, and I think that stems from Kyler Murray and his demeanor, the way this guy carries himself. He's very cool, calm, and collected, and we've seen that out of him, and that sort of sets the tone for the rest of that group. Now, but the fact is they've got to be as close to perfect as possible as they can be every Saturday, or in this case Friday, in order to get them where they want to go, because they can't afford any slip-ups. They had a couple turnovers against Kansas. They were able to get just enough stops to get off the field and get that game in control, but still, it's a really tight rope to walk. As good as this offense is, and they're really good, they're historically good, as we've talked about over the last couple months, really, they're still, it's a very fine line there because of how bad that defense is.
Barry, we've seen in the NFL locker rooms, even come to physical altercations when we've had this sort of thing. Do you sense any sign of that? Are you any sort of cracks in that Oklahoma offense that would say, they're done with this defense?
No, I've seen no cracks, and that's a tribute to the players and to Lincoln Riley and his staff for keeping the lid on this and keeping everybody together, because that would be devastating to the program. But hats off to the coaches for keeping a sense of brotherhood and a one-for-all mentality when it's clear one of the great discrepancies in memory between the effectiveness of the OU offense and the OU defense. Lincoln keeps saying the defense has had a hand in all our wins, and the truth is the defense has had very little to do with any of the wins. In fact, they've been pulling on the rope the other way, and the offense has had to climb up a hill because of the defense. But So far, no signs of internal struggles.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how historically good this offense is, and you wonder, is this a wasted opportunity of a year because of this defense? We'll see. I mean, there's still a lot of ball to be played, and that begins again on Friday night, guys. And it's Morgantown. It's at night. It's going to be a tough place to play. It's going to be a tough opponent to play. Let's get to the picks. Ryan, no surprise here, but everybody on our staff says this game goes into the 50s. And frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if it goes higher, but you've got Oklahoma winning 58-54.
Yeah, I think it's just going to be an offensive shootout like we talk about. Both these teams are going to score right and left. It's going to look a lot like that game in Morgantown, the Tavon Austin game a few years ago.
Woo.
It's going to look a lot like OU Tech both this year and a couple years ago. It's going to be a shootout, but I think Oklahoma's defense finds one way to make a stop, and with this offense, that's about all you need.
Barry, you're going West Virginia by the hair on their chinny chin chin, 56-55.
I just think when you play this kind of defense on a regular basis, the roof caves in on you. And it did in Dallas. I think it's time it happens again. Sooners have been avoiding the landmines, but you can't keep playing this kind of defense and avoiding it. OU's got a much better offense than West Virginia, but the Mountaineers are going to be able to keep up because of that OU defense. Complete and utter failure to stop anybody.
I've got Oklahoma winning 59-52, but I mean, I could see this game going any which way. When you talk about that volume of points, it could come down to anything. It could come down to a muff punt. It could come down to a missed field goal that changes momentum. I just think this is going to be a fun game to watch unless you like defense. Then look away. Find an SEC game to placate yourself for a while, and then come back a little bit later. All right, we'll have lots of coverage as this short game week winds to Friday night in Morgantown, 7 o'clock on ESPN. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com every day in the Oklahoman.